Hi, welcome to my channel, America Teacher 5th grade, where you learn all things regarding 5th grade. Today we are moving right along in our American History unit. We are reading out of the book, Social Studies, United States Making a New Nation, and Unit 3, the 13 Colonies. So two cultures have met. We'll kind of combine some of them. Some of the big ideas right now are that commonality and diversity. The 13 English colonies were founded in different regions of North America and for different reasons, and so they had different people show up. See what to know. Why did different people come to the English colonies and where did they settle? How did new colonies impact Native American groups? And what kinds of governments, economies, and new ideas developed in the colonies? So we will be focusing on that. Today is just kind of a preview of Unit 3. We have a little story to read and some other things as we go through. It's just going to be real quick. So the 13 colonies, here's a timeline that helps with our chronological or sequential features. There's the picture. Look how fancy. I'm going to say this is how the rich dressed. Soldiers, their uniforms were provided by the king or the royalty at the time, and so their uniforms looked really nice. The British uniforms looked very nice. This guy is probably how most people dressed, whether, I don't know, probably sailors were a little bit different than farmers and those sorts of things. But it was the rich who were kind of pushing the economy, although different people were dressed differently. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. We're again starting at the 1600s, and if you remember, in 1630, the Massachusetts Bay Colony is founded. And just 10 years prior was William Bradford and John Carver with the Pilgrims. In 1632, Lord Baltimore founds the Maryland Colony. Does that sound familiar? Baltimore, Maryland. And down here, 1636, the Dutch set up trading posts on the coast of Taiwan. So Taiwan is clear on the other side of the world, but I think it is important to understand that that's what was going on in the world at the same time. So just kind of be thinking, oh yeah, all of this is happening in the Americas, but they're still used to Europe, Africa, and Asia, or they're doing their sorts of life is still going on over there as well. Here we go. In 1681, William Penn founds the Pennsylvania colony. A little bit later, in 1707, the Act of Union unites England and Scotland as Great Britain. I don't know if Scotland really wanted that to happen, but it did. There's lots of movies where they were certainly fighting from their freedom from that. Here we go. Let's see. In 1733, James Oglethorpe founds the Georgia colony, and at the same time, in 1742, Native Americans fight against Spanish rule in Peru. That's not even here in North America, that's down in South America on the Pacific side of it. So so all of these things are going on in the world. There's a lot of conflict going on in the world. People are still trying to make the best of it. All people, Europeans, natives, in whatever countries they were in. All right, here are some of the important people. I'll start up on top and then move it as we go. So first we learn about John Winthrop, and he lived from 1588 to 1649. He was an English Puritan leader and served as governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Next, I always love when there's a female in the lineup. We learn about Anne Hutchinson. She was born in 1591 and died in 1643. She was a Puritan settler who began preaching in her home. She was forced to leave Massachusetts because of her beliefs. So remember, people came to the Americas from Europe, especially England, to practice their own religious beliefs. And yet, when they started differing within their local communities, they were forced to leave. I think several people followed her, and she was a fairly independent person. So fortunately, she learned all she could about being self-reliant and knowing how to take care of herself during that time. All right, next we have a Native American. He's known as Metacomet. He was born around 1638. If you see that question mark, we're not quite sure. We do know that he passed away in 1676, and he is known to the English as King Philip. So they recognized him as a great leader, and so they called him king. And he led the Wampanoag in King Philip's War. Next we have William Penn. He lived from 1644 to 1718. He was an English Quaker who founded the Pennsylvania colony and encouraged fair and peaceful relations with Native Americans. And if you notice, there's a little color code right there. So like William Penn and Metacomet, these are what we would call contemporaries. And definitely John Winthrop and Anne Hutchinson, they were alive for most of the same time. And then we're going to move on down here. So William Penn was alive when Benjamin Franklin was a little boy, but I doubt that they really hung out together. I don't know if they ever met or not. But Benjamin Franklin, George Whitefield, Eliza Lucas Pinckney, and I'm going to hope that I say his name correctly, Olaudah Equiano, they were all contemporaries because they are all living at about the same time right here. And definitely these three near the end of their lives. So I'm going to push that up so you can see all of these people down here. Next we have Benjamin Franklin. He was born in 1706 and lived to 1790. He lived to be in his 80s. He was a Pennsylvania leader and famous inventor, and he's still famous today. He's one of the few people from the founding fathers who never became a president or a general, and yet we know him for all of his many inventions and things that he did to improve his communities, whether it was the library, the post office, the volunteer fire department. He was just making life better for everybody. And he published lots of books, and one of the first ones that he published was Poor Richard's Almanac, right there. Next is George Whitefield. He lived from 1714 to 1770. He was an English minister who helped lead the Great Awakening. So I'm going to say the Great Awakening. We'll learn more about that, but I'm guessing it has something to do with religion. And then he was popular throughout England and the 13 colonies. So I don't know if he started off in England. He must have, if we call him an English minister, and if he came over later, or if they just liked reading his books. I don't know. Next, another young woman that I am not as familiar with, and her name is Eliza Lucas Pinckney, and she was born from 1722 to 1793, so she lived to be over 70 years old. She was a daughter of a South Carolina plantation owner and experimented with crops such as indigo. So I like to hear that when she's experimenting with crops, that she is basically a scientist. And I don't know if farmers get enough credit for being scientists as well as providing food for us, but certainly they are always working on things like that. And probably, I think indigo made her pretty wealthy, if she wasn't already. And then next we have Olaudah Equiano, and we think he was born around 1745. He did live to 1797. And he was an enslaved African who later purchased his freedom. Even long before the Civil War, that was able to happen. So it's a little bit different than an indentured servant who just had to like work off so much time. They were like, oh, you're worth like, $100, and then he'd have to come up with $100, which was quite a bit considering that, sometimes people only earn pennies a day. So, and then most of the time he had to spend working for his master. And after he purchased his freedom, he spoke out against slavery in his writings and speeches. That's kind of what we call a self-taught man. And let's find out more about him. And again, paying it forward for his people, for anybody who is enslaved. This is colonial America. If you can bear with me for just a moment, I'm gonna add a little bit of music while this is going on and play them for just a second. I'm gonna pause on and off for a moment because I just kind of want you to hear it a little bit. All right, so thanks for being with me. This is I just feel like music best sort of combines cultures, and there were so many very different cultures, and you'll hear it through the music. So first, this is Aztec music, as they believe it was played. Remember, Aztec is way down here in Mexico City, and yet it's not hard to believe that there was a lot of trade going on at this time. And so about the same time as the 13 colonies are developing, remember Spain is also going throughout and building missions. And so they are building the Palace of the Governors in New Mexico, which is in Santa Fe today still. So that is one of the oldest buildings in America. And some of the music, and it may not be exact for all of the tribes in the area, but it's pretty close. What you're listening to now is an English folk song by Ralph Vaughan Williams, and that would have been taken over in some of the music that would have been brought from England over to like New England and these areas over here. Right now they're showing you the Mystic Seaport in Connecticut. I'm going to show you something very different that the wealthy probably listened to at that time. This is Ave Vernum Corpus by Mozart. This is what people who wanted to be refined and well thought of. It's kind of like what the rich would go and listen to, since this is Mozart and what they did. I'm going to say probably not so many people in America listen to it, but if you were trying really hard to keep up with your fancy cousins in England, then this is what you listen to. Okay, this is called the Wellerman Sea Shanty. It's all instrumental, and I'm just playing it because, yeah, New York Harbor and New York City, again, they're kind of bringing all of these ideas and these different cultures with each other. This is performed by Algal the Bard, if you want to look it up on your own YouTube video. Anyways, all of these different cultures are coming from all of these different areas, and I could play tons more, but Sorry, I don't have time for it all. So again, as we look, this is the New England area, this northern area right up here that now includes these states. Sometimes all of this area, I believe at one time, was considered Massachusetts, and then it was divided into states. This, even though it still seems like it's way up north, this was kind of considered the middle colonies. And because they are stuck between the middles, and then the South did not include Florida. That was still under Spanish rule. And the southern colonies, all of these, again, were kind of colonies created by England. And if you remember, there were like over 1 million colonists, or 10 million colonists, in like within 100 years. It's just wild to think about. The Spanish, they brought some colonists over from Spain. However, what happened usually was that many of the young men or the soldiers would also kind of take up local girlfriends, if you will, from the local tribes and start families with them, but then they kind of combined their Spanish ways, and versus the French, where they just totally like became almost, except for their language, which they kept for themselves, but they almost always combined with the local tribes. And down below is also kind of what we have, the Westover Plantation in Virginia. They feel like that is key. Again, English New England colonies, English Middle colonies, English Southern colonies, New France, all of this purple area. And notice that it does go up along the St. Lawrence River into Canada. And New Spain is basically all this yellow area. It includes like Cuba, they called Hispaniola, and Florida, and all the way up into here. We know they were, as far as Santa Fe, maybe even further. So, I mean, I've seen missions in a place called Cuba, New Mexico, which is really more of a small town. I was kind of surprised once when students were telling me, yeah, we went to go visit our family in Cuba, and I was like, really? Like, I thought they were traveling to this island, and no, it's this tiny little town up in the mountains of New Mexico. So, and there are missions up there, Spanish missions, that are older than most churches over here along the colonies. So this is what it is. Notice all the Native Americans, they're still here, but they are getting kind of squeezed out of their lands. Here's the Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, Shawnee, the Delaware. You know that they were, right along the coast, since that state was named after them. But some of them traveled. Mostly it was the Great Plains that did a lot of traveling. Really, a lot of the others, as we learned, they created, whether it was longhouses or just their own lodges. Sometimes, they could hold 30 to 50 people, or 30 to 50 families, and all of those. Here we go. Again, over along the coast, and I'm going to say Spain pretty much went up and down. There are missions all up and down in California, and if you were a 4th grader in California, probably one of your assignments was to create a 3D model of a mission, and everybody had a different one because there were so many different ones, or a drawing or a painting, and those different styles. Up Here, Nez Perce, that's important to know. Cheyenne, Wyoming is named after. There's the Iowa tribe. Just check them all out. Notice Yakima, that's now a famous city. Did you know it was named after a Native American tribe? Okay, the Chinook, not just a fish, also a tribe. Okay, one of our important skills is learning how to summarize for this unit. I do have a little formula, like somebody wanted but so then in the end, in your opinion, but you don't always have to do that. So this is kind of a key facts and summaries. So let's go ahead and learn about this because this is a very important skill no matter what you're reading. Why it matters. Summarizing can help you understand and remember the most important information in a paragraph or passage. So I do read summaries. I do feel like it would be helpful if you could do that and if you could do it in the style. We'll try that. Okay? So it says learn. When you summarize, you state in your own words a shortened version of what you read. Key facts, important idea from the reading. Another key fact, important idea from the reading, pretty general right there. And then summary, a shortened version of what you read. So it says a summary includes only the most important ideas from what you have read. Always use your own words when you summarize. And you're like, oh, but this sentence says it so perfectly. No, we need to learn to paraphrase. Otherwise, it becomes what we call plagiarism. So we don't want to do that. Okay, let's see, practice. It says read the paragraphs and write a summary for the second paragraph. It says settlers came to North America from different European countries, but Spain set up the first permanent settlement. So that would be one fact we could put right there. Spain set up the first permanent settlement. To be started by Europeans in what is now the United States. Spanish colonists founded this settlement in 1565 in St. Augustine, Florida. And so first permanent settlement, St. Augustine, Florida in 1565. Summary. So they're kind of doing it for you. In 1565, Spain founded St. Augustine, the first permanent European settlement in what is now the United States. And so there we go. We have all of our key facts into not two sentences, but into one sentence. All right, so let's try that with this one. Most settlers who came to North America in the 1600s were English. One reason for this was that England had more people than it could feed. Poor people and orphans were sometimes sent to America, sometimes against their will. And back in the day, I don't know if it's hard to believe or not, they had what is called debtor's prison. I think now how many people have so much money written, on their credit cards, and we all have this credit, but and so we're all kind of debtors if you have a credit card bill. But imagine if somebody all of a sudden said, and you were making monthly payments and you're being responsible and you're being good, but all of a sudden somebody said, oh, you owe me that entire amount right now. And you're like, I don't have the entire amount right now. And sometimes that happened and they said, well, then I'm going to send you to debtor's prison. And so they did that, and then if they couldn't pay their bill, the only way they could really get free was to choose to either come to like the Americas or to Georgia. But let's try that. Okay. So what's that? Most settlers who came to North America in the 1600s were English. So I would say in the 1600s were English. Was that England had more people than it could feed, or that it chose to feed. Maybe it could feed them. I don't know. Did you think about that? And I do believe, there's some things out there, but maybe they were selling their wheat overseas to another country because they were willing to pay more. And then, anyways, those are kind of economic decisions. Poor people and orphans were sometimes sent to America against their will. But so I'm going to say most poor people and orphans from England were sent to came to North Americas in the 1600s. I don't know. You could probably word it even better than that. Okay, let's see. Apply. Read the paragraphs and answer the questions. Young colonists. Many children came to North America from England without their families. Can you imagine doing that? Some of them were orphans. Others came from poor families. In England, many parents did not earn enough money to feed their children. In the Virginia colony, tobacco plantations needed lots of workers. The owners of the Virginia Company wanted to put English children to work. They asked English leaders to allow the company to take children to the Virginia colony as indentured servants. The children would work for a period of time, usually about 7 years. I can't even imagine. You imagine being 10 years old and you've already lost your parents, and because like they died in with a fever or a disease, and then they're like, what do we do with you? I know, we'll ship them overseas. And then you have to work for these strangers for 7 years, like from 10 to 17. After they completed their service, they would receive some basic supplies, some food, and their freedom. Many children, however, did not survive long enough to be granted their freedom. It's kind of why we have child labor laws. I know a lot of you are like, oh man, I don't want to go to school. But how lucky you are to be in school or to be improving yourself beyond school, because if you weren't in school, you could be out in a field working hard with nobody caring for you, whether or not you lived or died, or if you had a cold, if you didn't feel well. Okay. The climate and living conditions in North America were very different from those in England. Many indentured servants died from illness within 2 years. Wow. Indentured service, though, was often the only choice for many poor children and adults. If they could survive their period of service, they would have a fresh start in a new land. Wow. Definitely this is a reenactment, kid. I don't know if most were so happy. Summarize. Why did many orphans and poor children become indentured servants? 2. Why did the Virginia Company want to take children to the Virginia colony? 3. How would you describe life for young indentured servants in North America? And, I think here in America, we think as an old problem, if we think of it at all. And yet I do believe that this is what's going on all around the world. In other countries, whether it's in South America or in India or some of the poorer Asian countries, these kids, they've got it rough. So that would be something to focus on and maybe research some more. What could you do to help improve a life for a child in another country? That would be an amazing thing. And not just say, oh, well, just let everybody come to America. What could you do to improve their life there? Are you willing to put somebody up, and not just say, oh, come to America, somebody will take care of you? Are you willing to take care of them? And that's usually kind of the process for getting into America is knowing that somebody was willing to sponsor you. Somebody was willing to support you, make certain you knew the language, or at least help you get around to the grocery store and those kinds of places, help you fill out the forms in another language. There's a lot of things that are that need to be considered. All right, here's a fun story. I'm excited to read this one. It's called The Courage of Sarah Noble, written by Alice. I didn't bring my reading glasses. Written by Alice, I'm going to say, is that a Y or a G? Dalyliesh. Illustrated by Greg Newbold. That font was a little different. It was hard for me to read that letter. It says, in 1707, 8-year-old Sarah Noble lived in Westfield, Massachusetts with her mother, father, and 7 brothers and sisters. When her father, John, decided to move the family to Connecticut, Sarah went with him. She cooked while he built their family a new home. At her new home, Sarah became friends with Tall John and his family. They were Native Americans who lived nearby. When Sarah's father traveled back to Massachusetts, Tall John's family cared for Sarah. I wonder if this is based on a true story. Go. On October days were warm and sunny. The Indian women spread the corn out to dry. At night, Sarah helped them to cover it carefully so the heavy dew would not wet it. There were many things to do. Tall John's wife taught Sarah how to weave a basket, and because Sarah's clothes were stiff and heavy, the Indian woman made her clothes of deerskin, such as the Indians wore when the days grew colder. She also made a pair of deerskin moccasins. Sarah's feet felt light and free. She walked softly as the Indian children did. Often she thought of her family. Were they on the way? Would Hannah and Margaret be afraid of wolves? Stephen would not be, and the baby was too young to know about the danger. There is nothing, she thought, to be afraid of here with Tall John and his family. But there was. The pleasant, quiet days came to an end, and all at once Sarah felt that there was fear and disturbance in the air. And so notice that that word is underlined, and down here it tells us what it means. A disturbance is disorder or trouble. So even though it wasn't exactly anything she knew about, there is still some problems. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put that up. Sorry if you don't get to see the picture. Feel free to take a screenshot if you want to read this story on your own. Hey, more Indians kept watch on Guarding Hill. The Indians from the north must be coming, so Sarah scarcely knew whether to sleep at night. Suppose. But tired from long days in the sun, she slept at last, always with a fold of her cloak caught in her hand. And before she slept, she said to herself, "Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble, keep up your courage." Once in the night she wakened and listened. Tall John had told her, partly in words and partly by signs, that all along the great river there were hills like Guarding Hill, where men kept watch. If the Indians from the north were coming, the word would be passed from hill to hill by calling, and the villages would be ready. Sarah listened and listened. Once she seemed to hear a long, low wailing. Was this the signal? Were the Indians coming down from the north? And it says right here, oh, there we go, wailing, a sad cry, a low, sad cry. And she's like, I don't know, if you don't know the signal, that would be a little nerve-wracking. She waited for the village to waken, but everything was still. In the darkness she could hear the even sleep breathing of Tall John and his wife, of Small John and Mary. "Why, it's nothing but a wolf," said Sarah. Soon her heart beat quietly, and she too was breathing evenly in sleep. In the morning Tall John told her that there had been fear, but the danger had passed. The river villages would not be raided. So, forgetting all her fears of the night before, Sarah played with the other children. It was such a charming game they played in the warm sunshine. Taking off all their moccasins, they placed them in a row, then hid a pebble in one. Sarah was pleased when it came to her turn to guess, and she guessed right. The pebble was in her own shoe. In the middle of the game, she turned suddenly, feeling that someone was watching her. And it was her father. John Noble stood there, saying not a word. His eyes crinkled up at the corners the way they did when he was amused. And he said, "Sarah, I had thought you were one of the Indian children." "Father," said Sarah, and ran to him, "has my mother come?" "We are all here now," said her father. "I have come to take you home. But, daughter, I think it would be well to put on your own clothes, or your mother will surely not know you." So Sarah put on her clothes piece by stiff piece. She now thought of buttons as tiresome, and as for petticoats, a petticoat, a skirt usually worn under outer clothing. We would call that a slip today. And I don't even know if many people wear those very often. The moccasins she kept on, for her feet refused to go into those heavy leather shoes. When she was ready to leave, she saw tall John looking sadly at her. "You go, Sarah," he said. "I must," said Sarah. "My mother is here." Tall John said nothing, but swung Sarah up on his shoulder, as he had done many times before. I really like this story just because, it shows that, like the colonists and the natives were able to get along, and yet it showed also that the natives themselves were not getting along with each other at the time. Summarize. Not that I like that, but it just kind of reminds you of that there's a different perspective to everybody. Why did Sarah feel she had to be brave? Can you answer that? According to the text, Sarah felt she had to be brave because. Do you think, and that's not the end, you need to give a reason for that. Do you think Sarah liked living in her new environment? Why or why not? And so a way to start that is, according to the text, I think Sarah liked living in her new environment because the text said, yes, she definitely liked the new clothes. And clothing is also part of our culture. You can kind of tell where like somebody's from by what they wear. I feel like today maybe we all kind of wear like a hodgepodge, but I felt like it used to be like you could kind of tell a little bit more, like if somebody was from California or New York or from the South or, from the Northwest, if they had like, by their clothing. And make it relevant. What are some of the things you might do to adjust to life in a new place? I think getting to know the people around you, learning to play their games. Those are all fun ideas. Okay, here's our very last one. Remember, we had a KWL chart before. What do you know about the New England colonies? What do you want to know? This one is a different one. This one is to pose questions. Learning to pose or ask questions as you read. So, pull out a notebook and have questions and then see if you can answer your own questions as you keep reading. So, that's kind of along with what do I want to learn, but questions, maybe something wasn't quite clear. Says, think of questions that might be answered by reading. For example, you might ask how events are related. Use the questions to guide your reading. Look for answers as you read. And so there are questions such as, how were the settlers at Massachusetts Bay like those at Plymouth? Answers, both groups wanted to live by their religious beliefs. So we kind of learned something new already. And why did people settle in Massachusetts? Well, we'll be reading to answer that, won't we? And here we go. Let's preview some vocabulary. Frontier. Do you know what that means? It'll be found on page 204. Common. Can you find like the common area? There we go. That like it's kind of like a park or a central square. And then naval stores. So we'll find out, is that a place where you went shopping or those things that they stored in boats? And I'm so excited. Our next lesson is going to be chapter 5, and we will be learning about the New England colonies. So we'll see how many lessons there are. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I just so appreciate you being here and taking time with me. I know that you're self-disciplined and sticking through nearly 40 minutes of a lesson, and you are improving your self-discipline, your knowledge with your self-reliance, self-respect, respect for others, And remember to be kind. I'm sure you are, and know that I think you are a fabulous human being. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.